Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Family Law, Season 2, Episode 6. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with the main case that Daniel and Abby are dealing with. A woman named Jessie, played by Candace McClure, which I was like, hey, that's so dope. I get excited every time I see her pop up and stuff. Either way, she is obviously dealing with, well, she's already divorced from her husband, but the problem is, like, they have a child together. I always bounce back. I'm forgetting, as it's been a couple hours now, so I forgot whether or not Andre's the ex or the son. For the context of everything, I'm just going to refer to her ex by her ex as ex and her son as her son, just because, but I'm fairly certain it's her husband's name's Andre, but either way, she feels like she's kind of being gaslit into, like, seeming crazy because she thinks all these things are being, like, done by her ex. Like, oh, her name is posted up here. Like, oh, call me up if you're looking for a good time or something like that. It's just like, yeah, she's getting all these, like, messages, like, all the time. Because she's a teacher and she's trying to relocate to a new place so their son can go to a school because a school for people who are on a neurodivergent scale, and because he has, like, a very, like, specific disorder, and for her he can't be at a school that really understands him. Teachers that are more equipped to understand and are commonly able to help with his circumstances, because that's her main concern. It's like, right, the way people, because, like, for her, it's like she also, she gets weekdays with her son, her ex gets the weekends, and it's like he's very big into his routine, and if you break that routine, it can set him off too. So he has moments where he can flip out, which for her, it's like, right, he can be such a sweet boy, and people can never always see that side of him. And now sometimes if he flips out just because, like, they were at I don't remember if it was like a play or something, but the lights, like, triggered him a little bit, and so she's like, people and teachers and everyone else kind of looks at him a certain way, thinking one thing, but it's like they don't know the boy that is. So that's why I want to move into a school where he's understood, and that's, like, all I want for my son. You know, it's very sweet, but it almost seems like maybe she's being gaslit by her ex, who's like, yo, I didn't do this. In fact, she did XYZ to me, but she's like, oh, I cut out, like, all the middle of all your pants because you were cheating on me, which I even love. Abby being like, yeah, that was inspired. Now, like, no judgment for me on, like, you doing that. I mean, especially considering, like, hey, once again, the parallels of the episode's arc coinciding with the overarching story arc that, you know, Abby's going through with her divorce and stuff like that. You know, very similar circumstances. So, especially because she's literally going through a situation right now with her with their kids, which we'll talk about Abby's side of things in a little bit after we wrap this up. I, from the beginning, was like, it's not actually going to be the husband, the ex. It's going to be, like, I was thinking, like, is it actually going to be the son? Is he going to be the one responsible? It's not wait until, like, halfway through the episode where I was like, nah, it's going to end up being her new beau, isn't it? Because he was a little too, like, accepting, like, nah, babe, it's all cool, it's okay. I'm like, because she also made it clear, she was like, yeah, we're moving to Victoria, and he's not. I was like, now that's interesting, because I was like, is he doing that because I thought he was going to more so look at it from the perspective of, like, well, no, that's also my son. Like, once again, he's not a stepfather. He's the father that stepped up. That's what I thought was going to kind of be the case here. I thought that's might have been, like, his twisted reasoning for it. It was like, he's just as much my son. I don't want you to leave. I want to be with. It's like, rather than telling her that or something. That's why I was thinking the justification for it. But even then, I was starting going, I was like, is it going to be the ex? Is it going to, because, like, I mean, not even the ex. I was like, is it going to be the new guy? Is it going to be the son? Because I kept bouncing back and forth between them. Because I was like, it seems like it's going to be the son, but some of the stuff is leaning to, because I even love that the story did go there where it's like, maybe it is the son who's doing it. But Jesse was like, there's no way it's my son. And I love they used Daniel's car as a setup. And it turns out, no, it was the ex. He was wilding. That's crazy, where he was like, oh, like, the fact is kind of like, oh yeah, like, I want you to see how messed up your ex is, show you who he really is. It's like, no, you showed who you really were. The fact is you were doing all these terrible things. I mean, you literally set like her garage on fire. It's like, yo, me and my son could have been hurt, but in his mind, it's like, no, I was just like I'm trying to like scare you a little bit, but it's because I love you. We're so great together. But it's also like, yeah, your son, like, because he kind of brushed it off as like, oh, this kid. That's also why I felt like her son had such issues with him, because he knew, like, I can sense how you really feel about me, dude. I know you're pretending in front of my mom, but you really don't like me. Because he was even like, oh yeah, that kid. And she's like, that kid is my son. And it's like, yeah. He was obsessed and in love with her, and it's like we were so perfect together. But that kid, you know, he's kind of an issue with our relationship. It's like, no. If you can't accept me and my son, then it's already a no-go. That's a non-starter. So he was just playing the role of like, oh yeah, I'm so cool about this kid, when in actuality I'm not. He saw her son as a roadblock in their relationship, and he was, for whatever, in some weird way, he almost thought she'd understand. And I think Lucy just kind of like labeled him as like some kind of narcissist, which you could read it all over that situation. But it is kind of sad. Like, yeah, they already had some underlying issues, these two, and it's like, oh, I thought, you know, she kind of apologized to her ex, and even he was like, no, it's okay. Like, he had us all fooled. It's like, yo, like, this is how he really felt, and he was doing all this stuff. Yo, that was like the ultimate gaslighting, bro. I mean, this is on the more extreme sides of gaslighting, of just how it kept getting worse and worse, slashing her tires, setting her garage on fire, putting her number out there to kind of embed. And all the purpose was like, no, because it's like, oh, I want you to kind of lean on me more, which she did, because she felt like, oh, you were the only safe space I got. I got this terrible ex, and like with this storm that is, the shitstorm that is my life, with everything going on, getting thrown at me when I'm trying to do what's best for my son. You're the only port in storm. And it turns out, oh, he was the one that was generating the storm. So that was kind of an interesting development of how that story played out. So I thought that was so interesting. I mean, like I said, because it played out so sadly too, because like Jessie was in a position at one point when she was about to the custody was going to like rather than it being split the way it is now, it actually went the other way, because she has a fear of fire, because she's like, her dad almost died in a fire when she was younger. She actually started it when she was 10 years old, which I'm like, I get it. Like, it's also like, you shouldn't be judged for something you did. Like, if it had been repeated behavior, okay, there should be some signs there. But you being 10 and then a fire situation happening to you like decades later, that shouldn't be held against you. But sadly, that was used against her in court. And even her ex, kind of, you could tell that look in his face. He almost kind of felt bad, because it's like, right, he wants, you know, his son to be okay too. And it's just, at the end of the day, it's just like, I don't want to be that far away from my son. You know, it's like, I know I only get the weekends, but I get the weekends and everything, but still. And so, you know, Abby had suggested kind of a way to kind of work around that. And it's like, right, he was like, well, we'll do this for like a year. At the end of the school year, you would come and reevaluate everything. And it's like, yeah, like they found some middle ground, because that's what she was kind of hoping for, that like Daniel and Abby would help her at least find some middle ground for X. But then it turned out like her, you know, she thought her ex was doing all this terrible stuff. It's like, oh, so it kind of made it a little easier to go back to middle ground. I love his lawyer they were making these points about like, oh, the terrible things, and his lawyer was like, yeah, my boss asked me to pull his finger once. And that look on Abby's face of like, I don't know if that was a look of, oh wow, I can't believe your boss would be juvenile enough to ask you to pull my finger, or whether it was her face contorting like that was kind of in response of, why would you put that in the same level? It's not, you know, I don't know which way Abby was taking that. So we have that. Getting to Abby's story in this episode, she's dealing with the person who's coming to evaluate her. Lucy was kind of giving her a dry run of like, all right, this is most likely what the what kind of, how many sexual partners you have, and like these might be things that this person might ask you. They're going to even interview the kids, and so for, you know, she kind of went a little hard on her mom last episode, but Joanne's like, this is my fault. But even Lucy's like, no, like Sophie's like 14. You thought she'd be okay looking after her brother alone. So yeah, she kind of because she blames herself. Because I think after cooling down, even Abby's like, nah, it's not 100% your fault. You thought she was old enough to look after. Like, they both wowed out in that moment. Like, once again, they're teenagers, so they're both gonna like handle this situation. They both did not handle the thought of their mom dating well. They both did not handle that situation well. Her drinking a whole bunch, him, because they never they're kids to an extent, but it's also like they've never really shown such rebelliousness to such an extreme, so it's like it wasn't really a pattern set, so for them it almost felt like it came out of nowhere. Obviously Sophia's kind of been like mean towards her mom like the past season or so, but then it's like obviously that kind of waned down after everything with Frank, but either way, now she's kind of being evaluated on whether or not she's a good parent. So, and I love that Joanne's like, oh, I'm about to go do our outreach, our kind of our more volunteer work. I'll tell them, sorry that you couldn't show up. And I love her trying to paint herself a certain way, but also trying to boost Abby up. Because even she was like asking Lucy, like, okay, like, what about Frank's infidelity? Shouldn't that kind of get brought up? But Lucy's like, no point to sling mud. Might as well keep it to just about the kids. But it's like, well, what if Frank brings it up? What if that ends up coming up? And it's like, then he's the one that's going to look bad. It's kind of Lucy's point. So like, you stay on the right path of just focusing on you being a mom, an awesome mom, and trying to be there for your kids. Yes, you've made mistakes, but it shouldn't define, especially when you've proven all over this time, like for like over a year, that you've been working so hard. And once again, I think it speaks volumes about Frank that he saw how hard you were working and like kind of like strung you along with like, oh, this promise of your family being together, and he went behind your back with the whole Felicity. So like it is on him too, and it just feels like he's all putting it all on Abby because there's been so many mistakes of like, yes, she's made mistakes in the past, but it feels like that's what really irks my nerve. Once again, that's why I'm just kind of like, I kind of hate Frank. Once again, we're kind of inundated to be a lot more, like, I can sympathize with Frank of like, I want what's best for my children, but I also don't like the way he dogpiles on Abby. Like, I think that's why, where it's just kind of like, hey, she messed, like, something happened, and it's like, rather than try, especially because they're going through a divorce right now, I think it's especially because for him, he has such issues where it's like, once again, everything between him and Abby is so hard. He wants to make things work. She didn't. She's the one that wanted to get the lawyers involved. She's the one that went after, got the flamethrower. So I think all that combined with that emotional moment of like, right, our son was gone, our daughter was out drinking, that's all on you. If it was one thing, it's one thing, but now it's both, and you were completely unaware. It's not, for one, it's not like you went to go check on him either, like, but it's like, oh, I took your word at face value. It's like, once again, he made it seem like he was in the bed. Like, what reason would she have to? Because he's always been a good kid. She would never think he would do something like that. So it's like, but my point was like, the fact is he labeled all these times that she made mistakes. Even stuff that's not her. She's like, yeah, because I would drink and I would take a nap when the kids were younger. What? It's like, oh, your daughter like almost got frostbite. It's like she was outside playing in the snow where I could see her. Oh, your son cut his hair with scissors. It's like, which is to me so stupid. I remember being in elementary school and cutting my hair with scissors. That's so stupid to hold that against somebody. I think every kid's done that. And for her, it's like they were like plastic scissors or something like that is what she was saying. It's like Frank tried to paint things in such a worse picture. And Abby ended up blowing up at the lady. Especially when they had like such a beautiful moment earlier on where it's just like, what's your relationship like with your parents? And she's like, yeah, things weren't good. Like it's, well, not just my relationship with them, but their relationship with each other. They would argue and I never wanted that for my kids. And, we don't always kind of get what we want. And it's just kind of like history kind of repeated itself, recognizing like, yeah, her mom had their faults, so did her dad. And even the fact is he wasn't in her life for like 30 years, which obviously she didn't really get into it, but we know like her mom kind of kept Harry out of the picture. Like she kind of pushed him away, kind of like really focused on the negative aspects about Harry and also made it seem like he wasn't trying to reach out when in actuality at that time he did before he completely stopped entirely because she kept blocking away. So there's that. And it's like, yes, their relationship's a little rocky. He always throws it in her face of like, yeah, you kind of owe me. But also, because I'm taking you in, I gave you a job when you kind of couldn't get a job anywhere else. But also, he doesn't really, he brings it up from time to time. But also at the same time, it's like, he had that beautiful moment early in the episode where it's like, she's like, yeah, they're probably going to interview you. And he's like, oh, so you want me to bury Frank like by telling her all this terrible stuff about? He was ready to do it. It's like, oh, I'll bury Frank if you need me to, honey. And she was almost kind of like, you could tell she was almost tempted. It's like, no, I just want, like, they're going to ask you about some of me. So any bad stuff, could you kind of sweep me? He's like, well, luckily there's been no incidents that I have to worry about talking about. It's like this moment and this genuine smile coming across her face, like, hey. And, you know, it was like this really sweet moment. Even later on with Daniel, he pulled a dick move later on, kind of throwing it in her face. But the moment Daniel heard about it, and she's like, I know we have our issues, but if you could, he's like, nah, I got your back, sis. Like, whatever you need, like, I will paint the best picture of you. Like, I'm not going to let our professional back and forth and our whole kind of our sibling thing get in the way of like, no, these are your kids. I see who you are and that you're fighting for your kids. Like, I'm not going to like throw you under the bus in that regard. Like I said, kind of throws her under the bus later on by threatening to use that against her when she kind of makes fun of his dating situation, which we get to in a second. But getting back to it, when that lady was going so in about all the stuff that Abby's done wrong, and she was just kind of upset, where it's just kind of, and she kind of flew off the handle for her. It's like, yes, I made this mistake, because it's like, oh, like Sophia still gets teased at her school because of that video. And it's like, yes, I made a mistake. My mistake ended up being public. It's like, because it's like, yeah, I was upset because Frank kicked me out. And it's like, oh, how'd you respond to that stressful situation? You started drinking. It's like, yes, but also it's like she's gotten a year under her belt showcasing that. Let's not forget that this is a bump in the road where it's like everything had been good up until now. You know, and the time that she's been working on being like a year sober, doing all this stuff, becoming a better person, working on herself, there had been no incident with her son or her daughter. And yet, like, all this stuff from the past, because that makes it feel like Frank was just ready, like, oh, had it all locked and loaded in this divorce situation, ready to pull the trigger on any of that. That just says a lot, that it's like you were just ready for any opportunity to dump all this to make her seem like a terrible, unfit person. And this is one, I brought it up previously, like I brought it up, like, I don't know the statistics of it, but anytime you hear about divorces, it always seems so nasty. Once again, maybe that's my perspective as an American. It always feels like on the American side of things, divorces get nasty. I mean, I'm sure, I know in some countries, like, it gets even nastier, you know, depending, because divorce is kind of really frowned upon. So, you know, I don't know if it's that way. I mean, like I said, it might just be all across the board that divorces can get nasty, or regardless. Like I said, I don't know the statistics between marriages that end very amicably versus, it just feels like you mainly hear about kind of like the nasty divorce ones. That's kind of what I'm reiterating something I brought up previously. So, but it's like their situation. I figured it would turn nasty, I didn't expect things to kind of go to this length, but it, you know. And for her, she kind of went in on like, right, if Frank cheated, and like, what about him? All I am is a mother trying to like get her kid, and he's keeping my kids away from me. He's not even answering his phone. I'm sure his lawyer told him not to do that, but it's like, she's like, I want to at least pick up the kids, let me talk. And like, even at one point, Sophia texts her like, yo, why do I have to talk to this person? It's like, ask your father. It's like, well, he told me to ask you. It's like, he's the one that pushed for this. She didn't. You know, once again, in his mind, he is being very retaliatory towards her in so many capacities. And the lady was like, yeah, I've kind of heard we'll kind of end things here. And that, because she was like, oh, I'm just trying to get a better picture. It's like, no, you're only getting a picture based on what Frank said. And she had every right to be frustrated in that moment. And Lucy was nearby, and she started kind of crying a little bit because she recognizes like, right, Lucy literally at the beginning of the episode told me not even to go like sling mud towards Frank, but I lost it because I was being vilified in a certain way, you know? I was kind of hoping Lucy would walk over and kind of like console her. I think she'll console her like in between episodes or even the next episode. But it was just kind of like, and for that to be how the episode ends too, it's just kind of like, ugh. Like it just leaves you kind of like, you legitimately feel bad for Abby. So we got kind of like the more serious stuff out of the way. Let's go to the more, I guess, lighthearted stuff. I do love that we pick up with the Cecil and Winston of it all. And Winston ain't having nothing to do with Cecil. And I love that, like, Nina got brought up, and it's like, oh yeah, Nina, like, she's a previous receptionist. We had a thing, and I love Jerry shot that down immediately. It's like, no, you didn't. It's like, well, he was like, there was kind of a vibe. And Winston's like, yeah, you want me to do a survey? It's like, yeah, but no one's on the other side of the phone. Yes, I'd love to answer their survey. It's like, oh, you're pissed at me because of the files. And it's like, yeah, you took all the credit. But for Cecil, he ended up explaining, I thought was actually, because I was like, oh, are they going to be like rivals going forward? But it's like, no, they're not going to be. I love that they actually kind of bonded this episode, because Cecil like admits, he's like, right, I've never had anyone say like, oh, good job. It's like, the fact of the matter is, like, that was the first time anyone said anything, like, good towards me. He is kind of, like, the butt of the joke around the office. Like, it's mainly, like, Abby, Daniel, and Harry kind of treat him that way. I don't think Lucy doesn't really do that, but he can be a little, like, what the hell, like, you have to, like, be like, yo, what the hell are you doing, sometimes, when it comes to, Cecil sometimes. But even the fact is, he was like, yeah, like, the fact is Harry constantly calls me Cecile, so it's like, he calls me the wrong name and everything, and that kind of, but that speaks more volumes about Harry and stuff, right? Because in his mind, he probably legitimately, because I don't know if Cecil has ever really corrected him. Maybe he has, and but more often than not, Cecil just kind of goes, yeah, whatever. Like, Harry might legitimately be like, wait, I thought your name was Cecile. It's like, no, it's Cecil. Oh. Why didn't you ever correct me? Because you scare me, I don't want to get fired type of... Either way. But Winston kind of connected with that, where he's like, oh yeah, my mom, I brought home, like, I was part of this thing, I got silver medal, but his mom was like, yeah, that's not gold. And I was like, yeah, that, you know, so it's like, right, that Cecil's kind of through that very same thing, and even kind of made him a certificate later on, had his name on it, even had like a gold medal, and it was really, really sweet of him. But granted, he's still kind of funny enough how, like, oh, Harry, get your name wrong. You spelled Winston's name wrong. You got, like, I think he put an E instead of an O. And, like, in his last name, he also spelled it wrong. But, you know, he corrected it with marker and then just kind of, like, kept it because he was actually really proud of it. Like, I think him and Cecil are going to be good buddies going forward. I hope that becomes a thing. So I think that's pretty dope. So I thought that was kind of nice. And on the other kind of, I mean, sucky yet lighthearted side of things is Daniel's situation. I love Abby and Lucy seeing him hardcore making out with his girlfriend, Clara, like a teenager. Making out like, oh, teenagers like in the back, like obviously they're in the front seat, but they're like that. You don't see people make out that hardcore unless you're like teenagers or whatever, right? And they're kind of poking fun at their brother. It's like, oh, you know, I kind of don't want to give you any compliments, but she seems great. And he's like, yeah, like the car is great and yada yada. She's like, no, I'm talking about your girlfriend, you idiot. But then later on, when he shows off Clara, they're like, he's like, hey guys, this is Clara, my girlfriend. But Harry knows her. She's like, Clara. He's like, Clara. She's like, Harry. And it's like, wait, you two have history? Didn't even say anything else. But then, like, Abby is like, yeah, we all know what that means. Like, they have history. She couldn't get out of that room fast enough. And I even love Jerry the moment she saw that happening. She was like, I'm going to leave the room first. She immediately left the room because it's like, yeah, I knew what time it was. And so it's like, yeah, your girlfriend slept with your dad. I don't know anyone that would be okay with that. That will always be like a psychological scar type of situation. And she talks about their history, like they dated like a year ago, and it was only for like a few weeks. Obviously, they didn't really date. It was more like we banged a couple of times. And it's like, why did you, and you never, even I was like, and she never put it together, Svensson and Svensson. She's like, I never knew his last name. It's like, that's how like informal it was. It wasn't anything like official, like, oh, we dated. And so, and then I love that Danny got so into much his own head. He's like, oh, I don't want to make this weird. And Harry's like, it's not weird for me, son. I was like, why wouldn't it be weird for you? There's got to be a little bit of like, he enjoys it because it's messing with Daniel, and he never brought it up this episode, but you can tell it probably like got him a little happy to be like, son. Kind of like, it's this weird male thing of kind of like, well, it's a very chauvinistic and misogynistic to be like, oh, like I kind of was there for, but I don't even know if Harry would even take it that far, but you know, he can be a little chauvinistic, a little misogynistic, so he could easily take it that far. But I'm also curious if on some level in his mind, it's just kind of like I like it just because it bothers Daniel so much. Because especially Daniel's like, oh, okay, so why did you guys break up? He was like, oh no, I wanted a woman of substance. But she's great for you, which felt like it was definitely meant to be the backhanded compliment. But I think it's just kind of like, right, maybe his dad was trying to be genuine, where it's like, right, there was just nothing really there deeper for us. But, you know, not saying like, like when it comes to me, there wasn't enough there, but maybe with you, she is. But it came off as like, yeah, there's not much substance to her as a person. Oh, but she's perfect for you. It's a very backhanded compliment for both. Supposed to be a backhanded compliment for Daniel, and then also it's a slight against Clara. But they tried to have. I couldn't even imagine trying to have sex after learning all that. But they tried and it couldn't work out. And she's like, "Can you get over this?" And he's like, "I don't think I can." He's like, when I try like be with you, I think of my dad. He's like, "Whoa, no, that's not what I meant." She's like, "Yeah, I guess we're gonna have to call it." It's like it is interesting. She's the one that broke up off of him, and it's like she handled that very like pragmatically. But because she could also see the writing on the walls. It's like, if this is an issue now, like, it's not going to go away. It's not going to get any better. Once again, I would have probably called it myself, too, because it's like, yeah. It's weird. It's like, you're sleeping with us. Even though if it's, like, she didn't know, none of you knew, but it's still weird. Like, I don't think you'll be able to get over it. I even love Martina kind of laughing. I did not, like, I figured, I brought it up last episode. I figured, like, all right, I know Martina's in a relationship. Something's not going to go right in that relationship, and Daniel's relationship isn't going to work out, and they're going to get together. Which still feeds into this path. I didn't expect the Clara situation to end because of this. I did not see that coming, and that was a beautiful twist. Give me a bingo card, never would have been like, oh yeah, you broke up because she slept with your dad a year ago. You know, that would have never been on my bingo card. But, you know, it's a little step closer because it's like, once again, maybe it might even be a thing of, maybe nothing ever does happen between him and Martina. Maybe it is just a thing of like, nah, they just stay really good buddies. But like, Daniel's very different around her than he knows other people. Even Lucy's kind of noticed it. She brought it up last episode. So she's currently in a relationship. So we'll see how that ultimately ends up playing out. I think that is going to be interesting, but I think they do gel well together. Because I don't know if he's ever been in a situation where he's been friends with his ex for a long time. I've never been in a situation where I've been friends with an ex for a very long time before it turned into a relationship. It's always been like, maybe we're kind of friendly for a little while, and then it transitions into like a relationship later. Like maybe, I think the longest was like a couple months of like, oh, this person's my friend, and then we started liking each other. Like that's like my barometer. But I've never had a situation. So Daniel and her could still fall into that category, but like form an actual bond and friendship first, and then transit. But it feels like everything else is just like, no, we meet on apps and we start. I mean, especially because like obviously he's like older, so it's like you're also going to be in that situation. Like I'm sure it can happen, but I would assume like that happens a lot more when you're younger and a lot less because you're usually going into something with the point of, I mean, obviously you want to get to know each other first and then like, you know, before you really start dating, but it's like, it's a different beast when it's like, oh, you start off as friends and then transition versus like, oh, we're getting to know each other in a friendly sense, but not really like friends, but we're sussing each other in a more romantic sense. So it's like the building blocks towards a relationship versus, oh, we were friends first and then we started dating and then it kind of put our, I don't know if that's necessarily better for our foundation or not. I mean, because it could be such a rocky thing. Like it comes with its own pros and cons. So I just thought it's just kind of interesting. To see how that all plays out. Like I said, I think that's going to be the end result, but the journey there is going to be interesting. So, but really, that's all I wanted to talk about. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.